Jeff Chandler was one of Hollywood's brightest stars. But in 1961, everything came to a sudden and shocking end. The official story was simple, maybe too simple. So why are people still asking questions decades later? Join us as we dig into the Hollywood mystery that refused to stay buried. The rise of a star. Jeff Chandler, born Ira Grassel on December 15, 1918, came into the world during a difficult time in American history. His family lived in Brooklyn, New York, and like many others during the Great Depression, they struggled to make ends meet. He was raised in a working-class Jewish household where life was often challenging. Money was tight, and the future uncertain. But even as a young boy, Chandler showed signs of artistic talent and a strong interest in the performing arts. From an early age, he was drawn to acting and storytelling. These interests were not easy to pursue in a time when families were focused on simply surviving. But Chandler had a determination that set him apart. He didn't let hard times stop him. After finishing school at Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn, a place known for producing many talented artists and entertainers, he decided to follow his passion for acting. He enrolled at the Fagan School of Dramatic Art in New York City. There, he began to study acting more seriously. He took part in school productions, learned the techniques of voice and movement, and became more confident in his abilities. It was clear that Chandler was not only passionate about acting, but he was also dedicated to getting better. He knew talent wasn't enough on its own. He needed skill, discipline, and training. When World War II began, Chandler put his acting dreams on hold to serve his country. He joined the U.S. Army and was stationed in the Aleutian Islands, a remote and difficult post. Military life was hard, but it gave him something important: structure and mental toughness. After the war ended, Chandler returned to civilian life. Like many veterans, he had to figure out what came next. For Chandler, the answer was clear: acting. He started working in radio, where his rich, deep voice quickly got attention. In the 1940s, radio was still a major form of entertainment, and Chandler's baritone voice stood out. He got steady work playing characters in radio dramas. These roles helped him gain experience and build a reputation. His voice became his calling card, opening doors that eventually led him to film. Chandler's big break in movies came in 1948, with a small but powerful role in Johnny O'Clock. In the film, he played a tough gangster, a role that suited his strong voice and quiet intensity. Though it wasn't a leading role, it got people in the industry talking. Studio executives and film critics noticed him, and it wasn't long before he began to get offers for larger roles. The real turning point came in 1950 with Broken Arrow. In this film, Chandler played Cochise, an Apache chief. The role was complex and challenging, but Chandler gave it everything he had. He played Cochise not as a stereotype, but as a proud, intelligent, and compassionate leader. It was a performance full of dignity and strength. At a time when Native Americans were often portrayed unfairly in film, Chandler's respectful and human portrayal was a major change. And while his rise was impressive, what came next in his personal life would be anything but smooth. Fame at a cost. After Jeff Chandler rose to fame in the early 1950s, his life became a constant cycle of work and pressure. He quickly became one of Universal Pictures' most reliable stars. The studio trusted him to deliver strong performances, and he rarely disappointed. But success came at a cost, one that affected not only his health, but also his personal life. Chandler signed a demanding contract with Universal Studios, which required him to make 2 films per year. On the surface, this might not sound like much, but each movie took months to prepare, shoot, promote, and finish. Besides acting, Chandler was also involved in singing performances and public appearances. These weren't just side projects. They were part of his public image, and they took up even more of his time. There were constant meetings, rehearsals, and travel. Chandler also ran his own production company, which added another layer of stress. Over time, this packed schedule became overwhelming. By the mid-1950s, the effects of this non-stop work were becoming obvious. Chandler's wife at the time, Actress Marjorie Hossel described him as chronically fatigued. She said he would sometimes fall asleep in the middle of conversations, even in public places. His exhaustion was not just physical, it was emotional too. He was so drained by his responsibilities that even when he was physically present, he often wasn't mentally or emotionally engaged. It was like he was always somewhere else in his mind, weighed down by the next job or the next deadline. Jeff Chandler married Marjorie Hossel in 1946, just as his Hollywood career was starting to grow. She had her own background in acting, but she eventually stepped away from the spotlight to focus on their family. The couple had two daughters, Jaime, born in 1947, and Dana, born in 1949. At first, they appeared to be the picture of a glamorous Hollywood family, but behind the scenes, there were serious problems. Their marriage went through many ups and downs. They separated in 1951, but tried to work things out. Unfortunately, the same problems kept coming back. In 1954, they separated again, and Marjorie filed for divorce, saying the marriage had broken down beyond repair. She mentioned Chandler's extreme fatigue as a major issue. He wasn't just tired, he was constantly unavailable, both physically and emotionally. She said he would disappear into his work and leave little time for their relationship or their children. The couple made another attempt to fix things in 1955 and briefly reconciled, but it didn't last. In 1957, while filming a movie in Italy, Chandler began a public affair with actress Esther Williams. This was the final straw for Marjorie. She filed for divorce again, and this time, it was permanent. The divorce was finalized in 1959. During the court proceedings, Chandler's income was revealed. He earned around $250,000 in 1957, which was a very large amount at the time. He was paid $60,000 per film in 1957 and $75,000 per film in 1958. He also made money from his singing career and personal appearances. But despite his high earnings, he wasn't financially secure. Between agent fees, manager commissions, legal expenses, and lifestyle costs, much of his income was quickly spent. As part of the divorce settlement, Chandler agreed to pay over $2,100 per month in alimony, plus $500 per month in child support. He also paid a lump sum of $100,000. These numbers show how seriously the courts took his financial responsibilities, but they also revealed the strain he was under. Maintaining his public image and family obligations while juggling a high-pressure career left him stretched thin in every direction. Chandler's emotional and physical collapse became more visible as time went on. He was often seen falling asleep on set or during social events. This wasn't due to laziness, it was pure exhaustion. Co-workers noticed that he was constantly tired, and those close to him said he seemed emotionally worn out. Instead of spending time with his family during breaks, he would retreat into his business office. His wife said he spent all of his free time working, writing, planning, or managing his company. Even at home, he wasn't really present. Marjorie later shared that she developed an ulcer during their marriage, something doctors often link to extreme stress. It was a physical sign of how deeply affected she was by the emotional toll of their relationship. She wasn't just hurt by Chandler's absence, she was suffering from it. By the late 1950s, it was clear that Jeff Chandler's personal life was falling apart. His fame and success had come at the cost of his health and happiness. He was admired by fans and respected in Hollywood, but behind the scenes, he was struggling to keep everything together. And just when things couldn't seem more overwhelming, a shocking romance and public scandal would push his personal life even further into the spotlight. Love affairs and rumors. Jeff Chandler may have looked calm and confident on screen, but his personal life told a much more complicated story. After the breakdown of his marriage to Marjorie Hossel, Chandler's romantic life began drawing more attention, especially from the tabloid press, which was becoming more aggressive in the 1950s. For someone already dealing with intense work pressure, the added scrutiny of his love life only made things more difficult. One of the most talked-about chapters in Chandler's personal life began in 1957, while filming Raw Wind in Eden in Italy. On set, he began a high-profile affair with actress Esther Williams. Williams, a former swimming champion and major Hollywood star, quickly became a central figure in Chandler's life and the media's. Their relationship wasn't exactly a secret. The press caught on quickly, and it became clear to Chandler's wife that the marriage was over. Williams would later become one of the most controversial voices in Chandler's story. In her 1999 autobiography, The $1 Million Mermaid, Williams made a shocking claim. She said Chandler had proposed marriage to her, but then confessed to being a cross-dresser. According to Williams, this revelation ended their relationship. The claim was explosive. It caught the public and the media completely off guard and quickly caused a storm of reaction. Chandler had always been seen as a strong, traditionally masculine figure. His tall build, gray hair, and deep voice helped create an image of him as a rugged leading man. The idea that he might have a private life that clashed so sharply with that image was hard for many to accept. Reactions from Chandler's friends and Hollywood colleagues were fast and emotional. One of the most vocal defenders was Jane Russell, a famous actress and a close friend of Chandler's. She flat-out rejected the idea. "Cross-dressing is the last thing I would expect of Jeff," she said. "He was a sweet guy, definitely all man." Others in the industry echoed her disbelief. Many felt the claim was exaggerated or misunderstood. Some believed it was unfair to bring such a personal allegation into the public decades after Chandler had died and couldn't defend himself. Whether true or not, Williams' statement opened a door to speculation that would follow Chandler's legacy long after his death. Aside from his relationship with Esther Williams, Chandler was also connected to other women in the industry. He was quietly involved with actress and singer Gloria DeHaven, though the relationship was kept private. He was also linked to Ann Sheridan, another respected Hollywood star. None of these relationships were ever officially confirmed, but they helped fuel ongoing curiosity about his personal life. What made it worse was the tabloid media environment of the 1950s. This was the era when magazines like Confidential were at their peak. These publications thrived on scandal and weren't afraid to cross boundaries. In one case, detectives reportedly followed Chandler and Gloria DeHaven to gather proof of their affair. These types of invasions weren't unusual for the time. Celebrities were often trailed, photographed, and written about without their consent. Chandler became one of the many stars caught in this new wave of public exposure. The pressure from the press added even more weight to Chandler's already busy and stressful life. He had to manage not only his career, but also how he was seen by the world. He had built a public persona based on strength, confidence, and dependability. But behind the scenes, things were far less simple. Chandler's life was full of emotional highs and lows, failed relationships, and increasing tension over how he was portrayed. And while the headlines faded over time, what happened next would reveal a truth even more heartbreaking than the rumors. The sudden death that didn't add up. In May 1961, Jeff Chandler checked into Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles for surgery to correct a slipped disc in his back. This kind of spinal surgery was relatively common and considered safe. Chandler had been dealing with chronic back pain for some time, likely made worse by the physically demanding roles he took on in films. His doctors recommended the procedure to improve his quality of life and allow him to continue working without pain. The surgery itself was expected to be straightforward, but something went terribly wrong. Within days, Chandler's health began to deteriorate rapidly. He developed a severe blood infection, also known as sepsis, which led to complications that his body couldn't fight off. On June 17, 1961, Jeff Chandler died in the hospital. The cause of death was officially listed as complications from surgery, with a focus on the infection. The news devastated his fans and stunned Hollywood. He was only 42, in good physical shape, and still actively working. How could a man who walked into the hospital for a basic procedure end up dead just days later? At first, people accepted the official version of events. But soon, questions began to build. The people closest to Chandler were the first to express doubts. His ex-wife, Marjorie Hossell, who had known him well for years, said she was deeply unsettled by how fast he had declined after the surgery. She described him as tired and stressed in the months before his operation, but never seriously ill. The speed of his death didn't make sense to her. Friends and fellow actors were also suspicious. Some said they had spoken with him shortly before the surgery and found him to be in good spirits. Rumors began to circulate that something had gone wrong in the operating room, something no one wanted to talk about openly. One especially troubling report came from a close friend of Chandler's, the famous entertainer Sammy Davis Jr. According to Davis, a nurse at the hospital had quietly confided in him that there had been panic in the operating room. She reportedly said Chandler had suffered seizures during surgery and that doctors and nurses didn't seem prepared for what happened. The idea that a mistake or misjudgment had occurred behind closed doors started to gain traction. Others whispered about Chandler's known allergy to certain medications. People familiar with his medical history suggested that he had warned doctors about specific drug sensitivities, particularly to penicillin. These early concerns were mostly dismissed or brushed aside at the time. The hospital released a standard statement, and the story faded from the headlines. But those who had known Chandler best continued to question the official version. They suspected that something had been missed, ignored, or covered up. Years went by without any answers, but the mystery never fully went away. Then, decades later, new information came to light, thanks to the efforts of Chandler's daughter, Jaime Tucker. As an adult, she began digging into her father's medical history. For years, she petitioned for access to his sealed hospital records, convinced that the truth had been hidden. After a lengthy legal process, she finally won access to the files. What the records revealed was deeply disturbing. Chandler had indeed listed a serious allergy to penicillin in his medical forms. Despite this, he was given a penicillin-based antibiotic either before or after the surgery. This was not a simple mistake. It was a direct violation of his known medical needs. The records also showed that no proper precautions were taken to monitor him for allergic reactions during or after the operation. This error alone could have been fatal. A person with a penicillin allergy can suffer from anaphylaxis if exposed to the drug. Anaphylaxis is a severe and sudden reaction that can include difficulty breathing, a drop in blood pressure, seizures, and loss of consciousness. Without immediate treatment, it can be deadly. According to the newly released documents, Chandler did begin to show signs of distress shortly after receiving the medication. He had seizures and began hemorrhaging, but hospital staff reportedly did not respond in time or with the right treatment. The combination of the allergic reaction and the internal bleeding overwhelmed his body. Within days, he developed sepsis, which eventually led to organ failure and death. The records also noted a disturbing lack of communication between medical teams. Nurses reportedly documented his reactions in notes, but those notes were not acted on quickly. Some files even indicated confusion among staff about who had approved the medication. The most devastating part of the revelation was that Chandler's death could have been prevented if his allergy had been taken seriously, if staff had been better prepared, and if communication had been clearer. He likely would have survived. Instead, a respected actor and devoted father died because of negligence and mismanagement in a medical setting that should have been safe. In the wake of these findings, it also became clear why the truth had stayed buried for so long. Cedars of Lebanon Hospital had a reputation to protect. At the time, hospitals and studios often worked quietly to avoid scandal. Chandler was under contract with Universal Pictures, and his sudden death raised serious questions. The studio system had a lot to lose if the truth came out, especially about one of its biggest stars. It's believed that efforts were made, both by the hospital and the studio, to suppress the details and avoid legal fallout. Today, the real story of Jeff Chandler's death is finally known. It wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the result of human error, ignored warnings, and a system more focused on damage control than patient safety. Chandler didn't die because of bad luck. He died because people failed to listen and act when it mattered most. And as the full truth surfaced, it also pulled back the curtain on the deeper problems Hollywood didn't want anyone to see. More on that coming up. Hollywood covers it up. At the time of his death, Jeff Chandler was still under contract with Universal Pictures. He wasn't just another actor, he was one of the studio's most reliable stars. Chandler had played key roles in historical epics, war dramas, and westerns that had brought in large profits. His presence on screen symbolized strength, honor, and traditional masculinity, traits that studios loved to promote during Hollywood's golden age. Chandler's reputation was critical to Universal's brand. A scandal surrounding his death, especially one involving potential medical negligence or rumors about his personal life, would have been damaging. Studios during that era treated their stars as investments. They had a financial reason to protect them while they were alive, and an even bigger reason to control the narrative after their deaths. Universal had deep connections in the press, law enforcement, and the medical world. This gave the studio the ability to influence what was reported and what was buried. If it meant hiding mistakes or ignoring questions, that was a cost they were willing to accept. Public image was everything. As a result, Chandler's death was packaged in a simple and quiet statement: surgical complications. There were no public investigations, no questions from the press, and no hint of wrongdoing. Everything stayed neat and contained. That's exactly how Universal, and most major studios of the time, wanted it. Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, where Chandler had his surgery, also had a lot to lose. It was one of the most respected hospitals in Los Angeles and had served many celebrities. A high-profile death caused by medical negligence could have seriously damaged its reputation. According to later released information, hospital staff knew that Chandler had a penicillin allergy, yet he was still given the medication. This mistake led to a severe allergic reaction, triggering seizures and internal bleeding. He never recovered. But at the time, none of this was publicly revealed. Instead, hospital records were vague. Some reports were altered and others were never filed. Important documents, including allergy warnings and nursing notes, were kept from public view. Chandler's official cause of death, complications from surgery, didn't mention the allergic reaction or the lack of proper response afterward. For decades, these records were sealed. Families typically don't get access to private medical files unless they fight through legal channels. That's exactly what Chandler's daughter had to do years later. Only then did the truth come out about what really happened in that operating room. At the time, though, there was no public admission of fault, no investigation, no lawsuits. The hospital protected its name, and the people responsible for the error faced no consequences. Even though the official version of events stayed quiet, there were always whispers in Hollywood. People in the industry heard about what happened, or at least parts of it. Rumors about Chandler's allergic reaction, mishandled surgery, and the panic in the operating room spread among those who worked close to him. Some people believed it was negligence. Others thought it was worse. Still, almost no one spoke publicly. Why? Back in the 1960s, Hollywood loyalty was deep. People were careful about what they said, especially if it might go against a studio or challenge powerful figures. Speaking out could ruin a career. Journalists were often discouraged from digging too deep into stories that might harm the industry's image. Investigative journalism didn't have the freedom or support that it does today. Private investigators, press agents, and studio executives all worked behind the scenes to control the flow of information. Confidential magazine and other tabloid outlets might hint at scandal, but even they stayed away from pointing fingers at hospitals or big studios when real damage could result. The risk was too high. Some people, like Sammy Davis Jr., shared what they heard, but most chose silence, whether from fear, pressure, or loyalty. This silence allowed the cover-up to hold for decades. What's most heartbreaking is that Chandler's family didn't get answers until years after his death. His children grew up without knowing the full story. His ex-wife carried grief and frustration without closure. The public, too, was kept in the dark. Jeff Chandler's case wasn't unique. During Hollywood's golden age, cover-ups were common. Studios covered up DUIs, affairs, mental health issues, and, in this case, even a possible wrongful death. Hospitals, especially those serving celebrities, were sometimes more concerned about protecting reputations than telling the truth. But even in silence, secrets don't stay buried forever, and Chandler's legacy would rise again in ways no one expected. Jaime Tucker uncovers the truth. For decades, Jeff Chandler's death remained a mystery, clouded by vague explanations and sealed records. The official cause, complications from routine back surgery, never fully satisfied those who knew him best. Among them was his daughter, Jaime Tucker. She was young when he died in 1961, but as she grew older, so did her need for answers. What began as a personal journey to understand her father's final days became a determined mission to uncover the truth and expose a failure that had been hidden for far too long. Jaime Tucker always sensed there was more to the story of her father's death than what she was told. Over the years, she heard whispers from family friends and industry insiders. Some spoke quietly about medical mistakes, about something going wrong during surgery. Others hinted at an allergic reaction that had been ignored. But there was no hard proof. The records from Cedars of Lebanon Hospital, where Chandler had his surgery, were sealed. Even as his daughter, Jaime wasn't allowed access. But Jaime didn't give up. She began researching. She requested documents, filed formal inquiries, and met with lawyers. She wrote to medical boards and even reached out to people who had worked at the hospital back in the 1960s. At times, it felt like she was hitting wall after wall. Institutions were either uncooperative or had long since moved on. Many records had been lost, archived, or intentionally kept out of reach. For more than 2 decades, Jaime pushed forward with quiet determination. She wasn't a celebrity or public figure. She was a daughter who had grown up without a father and without clear answers. Her mission wasn't about revenge or headlines. It was about truth and about giving her father the dignity he deserved. After years of petitions and legal back and forth, Jaime finally won a breakthrough in the late 2000s. A court granted her request for access to her father's medical records from the days surrounding his surgery and death. The hospital, under legal pressure, had no choice but to comply. What Jaime found was both heartbreaking and validating. The records confirmed what many had suspected all along. Jeff Chandler had a known allergy to penicillin. That allergy was documented in his chart. Despite this, the drug was administered during or shortly after surgery. The result was a severe allergic reaction, anaphylaxis, which led to seizures, internal bleeding, and eventually his death. There were also signs of carelessness in Chandler's post-operative monitoring. Nurses' notes referenced unusual reactions, but nothing was done quickly enough. Warning signs were missed, and protocols were not followed. Jaime also uncovered documents that suggested internal concern at the time, statements and memos that indicated staff members knew something had gone wrong. But instead of being investigated or acknowledged, those concerns were buried. For Jaime, it was a painful discovery. Her father hadn't died from some random surgical complication. His death was the result of preventable medical negligence. A mistake had been made, and it had been hidden. With the records finally in hand, Jaime began speaking out. She gave interviews to newspapers, magazines, and documentaries. In every conversation, she reminded people of one thing: he wasn't just a star, he was my dad. She talked about how difficult it had been growing up without him, how the uncertainty around his death created an emotional wound that never fully healed, and how, even after decades, finding the truth brought both relief and renewed sadness. Her mission had succeeded, but it came with the painful reality of knowing her father had died unnecessarily. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Stay tuned for the next big Hollywood story.